computer. Okay, so let's now get started. So basically the main focus of today's discussion or lecture is we're going to look at how to present data. This is VS353, week 2. Okay, we're going to look at how to present data. And we have all sorts of different methods, but simply put, environmental data is usually presented in some basic forms, like you could present it in the form of tables. You could present it in the form of charts, graphs, you can also have flow diagram, figures, but collectively, you can call what we're talking about here in one form or another infographics. Infographics. Because if you simply write a report in the form of text and try to explain something in the form of text, sometimes it just doesn't get the message across. So let's take a look at what it means to have infographics. What makes an effective infographic, and then we'll go through some of the basics, and then we'll look at how to create a stepwise.
What it takes to create a unique and engaging infographic? Striking colors, neat typography, sensational headlines? There are so many roads that your infographic could go down. At its core, an infographic is supposed to be a quick and easy way of conveying information to your audience. It should visually appeal to the audience, convey essential data, build awareness, and maybe even generate leads if you're using infographics for business purposes. So, what makes an infographic effective? Number 1, informational honesty. We live in an internet age where fact-checking is easier than ever. So be sure that all the information in your infographic is truthful and honest. If you provide figures from somewhere else, back up these figures by asterisking your sources. Number 2, legibility. Although it's tempting to whip out the calligraphy-style fonts in an effort to look fancy, you should prioritize fonts which are simple and easy to read. Also, avoid making your infographic too big.
A typical font that you would use is Times Roman numeral or Arial.
Keeping the style on the minimalist side. Number 3, simple illustrations. Make your illustrations simple and ensure that they complement the data being conveyed in the infographic. Complex illustrations will distract your audience from what's important, your message. You're trying to communicate information, not replace Rembrandt. Number 4, limited colors. Limit your color palette if you're trying to create an infographic which is visually appealing. As a general rule of thumb, use 3 main colors, with the lightest color forming the background and the darker 2 colors breaking up different sections. Too many clashing colors will give your audience a headache. Number 5, interactive elements. Although adding interactive elements to your infographic is appealing, consider whether it is relevant to what you're trying to achieve. If you need to convey a lot of information about different subjects, interactivity could be the easiest way to spread out this information without having to make your font tiny. And there you have it. Go forth and spread your message with your fancy new infographic.
Okay, and we'll go into
Deadpool
do's and
and
don'ts
Wolverine. Let's go.
maybe a little bit later for infographics. Right now, that's just hold on now.
Creating an infographic.
That's going to the slides now. Infographics or informational graphics. So one can always present data in different ways, but what you want to do is you want to present it in a way that it's appealing to the person who's receiving the information. So graphics, they present information showing trends, they show proportions, they might help with complex relationships, and they're supposed to have a lasting impression. Now you want to make them as clear and as uncluttered as possible, right? And you can use different types of software like Excel to create them. Tables is one form of infographics where a large number of numbers can be put in rows and columns. It's a lot better than trying to show that in text. Now, though the tables do show numbers, they don't really show trends. So for example, here, if you have this information given in this table, you might not see the trends or the comparables. So for that, maybe you want to use a pie chart, showing the proportions or of what is whole. Now, let's say you want to create a pie chart. Always make sure that all the numbers in the pie chart that you're depicting, they should all add up to 100 because you're showing something that has 100%. Number one. Number two, you probably want to start with so let me sort of show you what I'm trying to say here. So let's say we want to make a pie chart, right? So let's go to my board here. We want to make a pie chart. And let's say we have a class where we do a survey. We say, which is your favorite superhero movie? So 25% of you say Batman, 15% say Superman, 35% say Wonder Woman. Right, so where are we at? 35, 40, 50, 75, right? 5% say The Flash. We're at 80% there. And then 20% say Fantastic Four. So the way I like to do this, and I think that's what's prescribed is, let's make the pie here. Basically, circle. You start drawing line, and you show the highest number, the highest first. So in this case, it'll be Wonder Woman, 35%. So that's the first. Then we'll go to the second one, which is Batman. So that'll be 25%. And you show it in different colors. And then what's the next one? 20% is Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four, 20%. You also want to label the numbers. It's the next one. 15% Superman. Right, and then the final one, the Flash 5%, although this is not to scale, but hopefully you get my drift. Also have different colors. In fact, you might actually fill the colors in. So that would be an example of a pie chart. Another way you could depict this information is bar chart. I'm not a big fan, but that's how some people like to submit it. So what you would do is, and you must label it. Like figure 1. Percentage of favorite superhero movie. In this case, you don't have to have it starting from the highest to the lowest. I would actually probably go in this case in alphabetical order. So I would first start with Batman. It's number 1, and it is at 25%. So let's say this is 20, this is 10, 20, 30. So this is percent of you guys who like it. 30, 40. This is 25%. So there you go. You've got your first one. And you colored it in. Why? This is 25%. So that's number 1. Number 2, alphabetically, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So that would be Fantastic Four. Fantastic Four. And it has 20%. 20%. So you can see the comparison, right? Superhero movie. Next, what are we going to do? E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S. So it'll be S. And that is 15% for Superman. Superman. 15%. Or S. T, that will be the Flash. That will be the Flash. The Flash. And the Flash has only 5% fans amongst you. So you can see in this, yeah. Interestingly, it's actually going down. And the last would be Wonder Woman, who is the highest. Should we use which color? Or use this one? We'll go back to black. So it'll be Wonder Woman all the way up to 35%. So that would be an example of a bar chart. So another thing you could do is simply show it with a line graph, which is actually in many cases the way I prefer. Showing it as a line graph. Where you have Batman, it's at 25%, so put a point here. Fantastic Four is at 20%, so that'll be here. Superman, 15%, that'll be here. The Flash here, and Wonder Woman all the way up here. So you would show it as a line. I'll draw with this a little bit better. What does that do? It gives us, so this would not be a bar chart anymore, it's a line graph. A line graph. Slides. You see, it says start at the 12 o'clock position, which is what we did. You can also show it like a puck or a hockey puck like this, more like a three-dimensional visual. Okay, like for example, in this case, you're looking at what types of what are the sources of fuel? You've got hydro, the coal, sorry, power, not fuel, power. Oil, you got natural gas, other, and nuclear. Essentially, some of the things that people sometimes make a mistake is that they don't show the proportions. So be careful about that. So here's some bar charts that we talked about earlier. That might be a good option. They do show comparisons, and they tend to give you an idea what you're trying to convey. Line graphs, we basically got an X versus Y axis. So it shows trends over time. This is where it's really, really good, especially for long-term monitoring. There's a concept in the environmental sector where you actually have the natural environment degrading contamination over time. Why? Because there are microorganisms that exist that might use the contaminants as fuel or as food. Not, not fuel, but actually food. So that's something to keep in mind as well while you're doing this kind of work. Showing trends over time. You might want to show it with just basic lines, or you can actually show it with different colors. Why? You want to give an effective, a good message. So let me try to explain that, and then we'll watch another clip on what are the do's and don'ts of creating an infographic. So let's say we have a site and we got a project where we went, we drilled. So it's a typical square site. We went, we drilled, and we have a monitoring well. We'll call it monitoring well 1. And it comes up contaminated. So let's say in July of 2024, you got a result of 1,500 micrograms per liter for petroleum hydrocarbons F2. That's in July of 2024. Now, you said, let's just wait for the environment to clean it up. Why? Remember, natural attenuation might be occurring where microbes are using the hydrocarbons in the soil and groundwater as food. So let's say you recommended twice a year. So you went back in December 2024, and the result was 1453 micrograms per liter. Okay, you've seen some improvement. Then you went back in June 2025, and you saw it was down to 1,050 micrograms per liter. And in December 2025, going to the future, it's at 800 micrograms per liter. Like if you write this in a table, how does it look? And that's what people sometimes do. They write it in a table. And let's say you went back June 2026 and it's at 600 micrograms per liter. And in December 2026, it's at 400. micrograms per liter. And then in June 2027, you've reached your target. You're below 250, right? You've been sampling over time, and these are the results. But the best way to depict this for a long-term monitoring plan would be in a figure. So this is time or date. This would be December 2024, June 2025, December 2025, June 2026, December 2027, or 2026, and June 2027. Make sure that your concentrations, so here it would be concentration of PHCs, F2, and it would be in micrograms per liter. Make sure you label that, right? So the lowest that you're getting is about 200. So maybe you'll start from 100, then you'll go, maybe this will be 500, 1,000, 1,500. So plot December 2024, it was almost 1,400. June 2024, June 2025, it's 1,050, so that's going to be over here. December 2025, it's 800, so there it's a reducing trend, which looks good. June 2026, it's 600. December 2026, 400. June 2027 is down to 200. And remember, our target was to get it below 250 micrograms per liter, which we'll assume is the standard. And you've achieved it. But what you want to do is you want to draw a line through it. You want to draw a line through it, showing the trend. It's easier for the reader to follow. You can then show the downward trend in contamination. Let's now watch an expert talk about what are the do's and don'ts of infographics.
It can sound intimidating, but don't let it scare you. Getting started is easier than you think. So you've done your homework and you know the best way to increase your brand engagement, traffic, and overall performance is to create an infographic. Yet, when you Google examples, you're overwhelmed, lost, and suddenly unmotivated. Well, luckily you took a deep breath, continued your Google search, and found me. Hello world, I'm Mike Ploger here with VS353 to help you take your infographics from zero to hero. Helping others create infographics is what we do best, and in this video, we'll help you get off the ground with 14 do's and don'ts of designing infographics. Shall we? The point of creating an infographic is to help a viewer understand a topic without reading what feels like a novel. As you begin, explore your content and analyze what could be turned into a visual. One place to start could be turning statistics into graphs, or if your theme is about the workplace, include a cartoon of someone sitting at a desk. Once you've discovered a few ideas, start to remove any information that maybe isn't the most relevant. Only keep information that directly drives your message home. For the text that you do want to keep, consider using bold fonts or unique styles to help it stand out. Then, put your ideas on paper. Create an outline like the one that we have here to help you visualize the final product. This is the best way to get an idea of your text to visual balance.
It's not crafty. It's your craft.
While you want to emphasize some of your text, you want to make sure you're not overdoing it. There are two basic rules to keep you in line. First, only stick to 2 to 3 different fonts. You shouldn't need any more than 2, and if you want to add some flair, just change up the styling. Make it bold or a little bit bigger. The second rule of thumb is to not go berserk with your text colors. Again, just like fonts, no more than 2 to 3 colors is needed. You want the text color to balance out with your icons and illustrations. And if you want to explore more about font pairing, check out VS353's video that we've posted in the description. VS353's founder, Paymon Tai, helps you decide what works best in what situation. When you create an infographic, it's easy for it to get out of hand and start to look sloppy. Keeping even margins around the edges of your infographic is the first step to ensuring a clean image. The empty spacing on the right should be the same as the empty spacing on the left. Same with the spacing at the top and on the bottom. Keeping an organized image is key in maintaining a viewer, and our next example will help even more. But before we get to that, here's another pro tip. VS353 templates have set margins. They can be found at visme.co right now, but first, before you leave me, we have some more tips to get to. Okay, keeping with spacing. Just as margins need to be equally spaced, the same is true with elements within the design. Look at the difference between these two infographics here. One has far too much text and no spacing plan. Meanwhile, the other one utilizes white space and has equal spacing beginning with the headers, subheaders, and even works all the way through with the icons and the text.
So another thing, why so much text here? That should not be necessary. And another thing is, there's a lot of text in here that kind of takes away from it. But let's see what he says.
All the design elements have equal spacing throughout the entire infographic. If you've ever heard of the term gutter, it's referring to the spacing that we're talking about right now. And nobody likes clogged gutters. Choosing your color scheme shouldn't require much time. The obvious choice is to stick with colors that match your brand, but if you decide to stray away from your brand, just make sure you use attractive colors to lock a viewer in. Also, keep in mind that colors have psychological effects on viewers. Bright colors can elicit happiness, while dark colors are gloomy. So think ahead, be proactive, and don't choose any more than 3 colors. What is visual hierarchy? Great question. Essentially, it's placing elements of a design in order of importance. Some details are more important than others, and that needs to be made clear. Titles always take this top spot, which is why they're typically the largest font and at the top of an infographic. Then maybe after that you have a header, so you want to make that a little bit smaller than your title, but bigger than the rest of your text. Your icons and subheaders should be substantial, but not to the point where they're competing for attention. Which brings me to my next point. In order to create a visual hierarchy, the elements in your design need to be as big as their importance. However, that doesn't mean every element should be a different size. Keep repeated types of content the same size, like your icons, headers, and text. This is another area where VS353's templates make your life easier. The sizing is done for you, making infographic design easier than ever. Don't begin creating your infographic with the impression that size doesn't matter. It does. Depending on where you plan to share your infographic, there are a few rules to follow. If your platform is Instagram or a postcard, a square or landscape format is the best. If you want to share on Pinterest, make sure you go vertical. By going vertical, you could also crop a square portion of the infographic and still post it to Instagram. Plan ahead and optimize your infographic for the right platform. Hey, maybe you decided to break.
In our case, generally, we're not really going on a platform. Our infographics are going into a report or a presentation.
Break the norm and use photography rather than illustrations. If you are doing this, you just have to make sure that you're using the highest resolution images possible. I know, duh, but it needs to be said. There are a few reminders that I have for you that could save you actual legal trouble down the road. First is don't use images that you don't have the rights to, and also only use royalty-free images that don't require a license. Yes, you can find these on Google, but only with the proper search terms. The most important tip to remember with your icons, above all the ones that we've already covered, is that your icons in your infographic must all follow the same style. There are a number of different icon styles to choose from on VS353's website, from line icons, flat or solid icons, and even isometric icons that look 3D. But whatever style you choose for your first icon needs to be the same for your second, your third, your fourth, and so on. Lastly, as we've mentioned, just make sure your colors match your text and only use free or licensed icons.
Now that I use Monday Service, AI makes solving tickets my form of meditation. Monday Service.
Including interactivity on your infographics is an excellent way to increase engagement and keep a viewer focused on your brand. Now, unless you're a software engineer, this might sound pretty scary, but I promise anybody can do it. Find a code widget that you like and copy it into the HTML editor of your website. Ensure it's a responsive code so it looks good on any platform. Interactive infographics are best for your website, but less responsive on social media. However, you can still download them in JPEG format and share on social with a link as a call to action button. And if you're still hesitant to dive into HTML coding, VS353 does it for you if you use our infographic editor.
I think we have the
Just like interactivity, animation may seem like a scary task. However, the benefit of standing out and catching attention right away is always worth a little extra work. Before you dive in, there's a few important do's and don'ts to remember. Do keep the animations balanced. Don't go overboard. And do have the same delay time for each animation.
that covers that. Any questions? Now, where are you going to use this in the near future in your reports? Let's go back to the slides then. Photos are really good. When you go to a site, it's better to take more photos than less. Now, videos, different people have different points of view. I'm okay with a few video clips as well, but photos are really, really key and an important component of your work. And a lot of time they are used to depict or to confirm that the work was actually done. Although not all companies use photos. But one of the key things I wanted to mention here is always have something in the photo to show the scale. Like in this case, there's a person in the photo to show the scale. Line drawings or sketches are pretty good, as long as they're labeled properly. I do like these. I do like this method of showing information as well. And sometimes in diagrams, you might want to have different colors or different shades, or you might have exploding diagrams, which show some information. Like for example, here you've got the different shades showing different aspects of this spacecraft, right? So before we move forward, I want to explain what I meant by having the diagram blown up, so to speak. Let's say we have that same site, and instead of just doing long-term monitoring, we want to do an excavation. Remember monitoring well 1, the groundwater was contaminated with benzene, or petroleum hydrocarbons. So we thought we'll dig up that area. No, actually, what we're going to do is we're going to inject. We're going to inject. So what are we're a chemical oxidant around it. So from here, I'm showing injection 1, injection 2, injection 3, injection 4. Right, but it might be hard for the reader to read. So what you can do here is blow it up. So what you do is you show this as a blow up. So in the blow up, it's much easier for the reader, the person who's trying to understand this information, it's much easier for them to understand what is going on. Injection 0.5, injection 1, injection 2. You've blown it up. You show where it is on the overall map, but you've blown it up. Then there's another thing you can do. You can do what the Ministry of the Environment loves. You can create a cross-section. The Ministry of the Environment loves cross-section. How do you do that? You show it like this, A dash to A, and then you show the surface. A to A dash, and then you show that. So let's say, in this case, you're going to show monitoring well 1, and they're going to want you to show where the groundwater is and where the zone of impact is. This is the impacted groundwater, right? It gives you a much better picture. And you say, you label it impacted groundwater, monitoring well 1. And what they're going to want you to do is to label the geology. So you've got fill material up here. Then you've got, let's say it's silt, and then silty sand. This is silty sand. Aquifer. And then on top of that, they're going to want you to show at least a few of the injection points where you're injecting chemicals. It's a big part of the work in environmental reporting. It's a big part of what we do. Cross sections are key. You guys remember your surveying course last year, or that was last year for you. So this is where accurate surveying comes to be important. Your borehole logging has to be accurate. What else? Your sampling needs to be very accurate. Sampling and analysis. Why? Because your entire infographic is depending on that information. I believe you've done this work already. Done the field. You've done this in topographic surveying. You've done this in a little bit in the soils, the soils class. You're going to do more of it. This was in your lab work, sampling and analysis. So now turn. You can also have flow charts as well. You don't really need a scale in this. You're just trying to show the different steps. Or a schematic like in electronics. You can now use Excel or wherever you're creating your infographics to place them into your reports. Word can also be used as well. So here are some of the steps. You can insert a chart with Word. We saw how to do that with Excel the other day. You can select Insert. Then you select the type of infographic that you want from the different selections. Like we were talking about the pie chart. You can also look at the color scheme. Now, you would go back and select the data from Excel. Or you can create a table in Word by saying Insert Table. Click on the table icon and then determine how many rows and columns you want. Based on that, you'll have your table. And then you can start adjusting your margins. Make it look pleasing to the reader. Make it so that the person who is going to be consuming that information is not overwhelmed, but in fact, receives that information in a good way. We talked about colored graphics. So the one negative that I remember my employers or colleagues always had towards colored infographics was that if you have to print it. But the good thing is nowadays, printing is not as big a deal. A lot of people can get by without printing. So that problem has been removed from the equation, printing. It's very rare that you will see people printing the large reports. And in fact, now companies charge clients for the printing. Or you can just gray out the colors as well. But that might take away from the infographics if you are presenting those. Sometimes people only look at graphics in reports. Sometimes they don't even look at the overall data or the source, especially when people who are in positions where they have a lot of they have a lot of work that they have to get through. So they try to spend the minimum amount of time working on reading these reports. You can also use Word to label. You can also give a caption. by inserting a caption and giving a figure number, a figure title, okay? Now, there's certain things that I want you guys to consider when you guys are working on infographics. I want you to think about how you're going to avoid certain pitfalls. But at this stage, I think it's a good time to take a short break. So please go ahead and take a few minutes. We'll come back in a few minutes, okay? Right now it's about 9:18, so come back by about 9:23. Okay, let's get back into our slides. So some things that you want to avoid are showing relationships that don't represent a true picture, right? You want to avoid a misrepresentation. Like, for example, the one on the right, it makes it seem like there's a big difference, whereas in fact, they're relatively close. And I've seen this a lot in political or religious discussions where people are not intellectually honest. So as an environmental professional, I want you to be very careful about that. I've also seen that in the environmental sector, but very rarely. Usually qualified professionals do not practice that, and I don't want you to practice that as well. I want you to be as intellectually honest as possible. Always clarify the scale, like you're seeing here. Now, in this course, you will be using Excel and Word, right? Where are you going to be using it? Well, let me give you guys an example. Let me escape from here, stop the share, and let me go over areas where you can be expected to use this skill. So this semester, especially, will you be expected to use this skill, these skills being discussed? When you create a waste audit report in this class. Number two, when you create a low impact development report in the other class. When you create a technical module and presentation in the other class. PW 312 and VS 353, this class. So this is where you will be able to use this skill set. So how do you, I think we've already talked about creating the chart last week, so we don't need to talk about this time. We also talked about using a spreadsheet to create a budget. Why? Because remember how Tom Cruise would say, show me the money. Until your budgets are approved, you don't want to be working in that project. So we've already looked at creating a budget in the lab portion, like you did on Tuesday. So I'm not going to be asking you to do that again. What we'll do is we will use some time here to look at how just let me share this with you guys. So on this website that was just there, you can actually go there and take a look at how to stepwise produce your chart in Excel. Right? So that should be helpful to you as well. And it still works. I just opened it in front of you, depending on which kind of chart you want to use. Because one of the challenges I have faced is that since I started using Excel in the 1990s, every year it changes a little bit. Every year they come out with some differences. So you probably want to have guidance like this available to you. And you can go over this in your own time. You don't need to go over it right now. Okay. Right. Another really good clip was shared with you guys last week about how to use Excel. Now, let us basically take a look at how data is shown or depicted in this report by a very reputable company. I used to work with them. Some of our students also work there. So it's a phase 2 environmental site assessment. So let's see how they depict the data. Let's see how they use their infographics. So you've got your text, your introduction. Here you go. You've got your first infographic. It's a table showing the areas of potential environmental concern and the associated PCAs and sampling that would be required. Again, here's your next infographic, a table. Got another table here. So initially, it's basically tables. So let's keep going. I do think they have figures as well, which is what I want to round off this discussion with. Showing take a look at how they've got table numbers, they got a title, they've got proper labeling, what each column means. This is extremely important. And then they've got the data in the chart or in the table next to it. So here's what I want to show you guys. You've got your figures that are really, really important. And each figure has proper labeling as well. Here's your sampling and analysis plan, your borehole logs that also are very key. Now, something that before we continue, I want to share with you guys. How did they take this data and how did they convert it over here? So when you're performing borehole logging, this is one of the more important and commonly conducted methods of sampling or logging. So let's say you go to the site and you're going to drill here. We're going to call it borehole 1. We're drilling. What usually happens is that you drill down and then you take a sample from and you make a note that you're taking a sample from 0 to 2 feet. And then you basically describe what you see. Is it moist? It's almost always moist. Then the color, let's say it's brown. And then you mention the 2 main soil types. Maybe it's silty sand. Then you mention, is there any evidence of odor or staining? None, then you just say no odor, staining. And if you think it's fill, you write it down. Fill meaning placed by humans. And then you go to the next sample. Usually in typical drilling, it'll be 2.5 feet to 4.5 feet. So that would be sample number 1, sample number 2, sample number 3. And you keep going. So the next sample will be 5 to 7 feet, 7.5 to 8.5, 9.5, 10 to 12, 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 What you're trying to do is you're trying to understand what the geology is like as you keep going down into the subsurface. And let's say from here it's moist, brown, sand. And it's the same here, same here. And then you basically then create your record in your report. Like we've done here. Got fill material, and you connect the different depths, right? They've gone from 0 to 1.2 meters. That's what they say is the geology. Then it's clay silt after that. And then it's gravelly sand. And what they've done is they've also mentioned how they sample it, that split spoon sample. And they probably took a vapor reading, which is something we'll talk about later on in the program, where you're looking for evidence of possible contamination. And they go all the way down to the depth of the borehole, and also they show where they installed the well. They show the screen, they show the backfill material as well. Then they add the laboratory certificates of analysis, which I'm hoping to actually have one of the lab reps come in to talk about how to present environmental data or how they generate the environmental data. Okay. So let us now check out, just to round off the discussion, let us now check out how this presenter talks about the best way to create an infographic in a PowerPoint. And then we will likely move on to our next topic.
Let's take a look at how we can use PowerPoint to create infographics. Now, infographics are really useful tools. Humans are innate communicators, and the visual element to communication is very important, and it's even primal. When you look at the earliest forms of communication that we have on record, we see cave paintings, hieroglyphics. Even before we had written alphabets, we were using imagery to communicate with each other, including passing on our genealogy and tribal or family history, noting our accomplishments and our setbacks, and keeping a record of our activities. Today we can incorporate visual elements into our communication through infographics, which are primarily visual presentations with supplemental narration. PowerPoint is a great way to do this. So let's dive in. Here I have a blank PowerPoint slide, which you're very familiar with. The dimensions of this slide are a width of 13.33 inches by 7.5 inches tall. These are pretty standard dimensions. They conform to the width and height of our monitors and our projectors, so we're used to presenting in this format. The 16.9 ratio is very common. But what a lot of people don't know is that we can actually change the dimensions of our PowerPoint slides. How I'm going to do that is I'm going to hop up to the design ribbon, and I'm going to go to the slide size. Now by default, 4:3 and 16:9 are the most common dimensions, but I can create a custom slide size as well. And I can choose whatever width and height I feel like. Now infographics traditionally are more vertical, but they don't have to. You can make a wide infographic if you like, or even a square infographic. In this case, I'm going to go with 26.666. I'm going to make it twice as tall as it is wide. It's going to ask me, do I want to maximize or ensure my fit? In this case, I'm starting from scratch, and so it doesn't really matter to me. If you already have elements on the screen, then you want to be mindful of this. So I'm going to click maximize. Now when I zoom out, I have a blank infographic. I can start by scratch, adding text boxes for my title. And then I can decorate the canvas by adding a myriad of shapes and texts if I want. I can even use some of those handy merging shapes options if I want to create some interesting elements. Now, I've given other webinars that talk more specifically about the fundamentals of infographics, the components, the elements, and how to create an infographic. In this case, I'm just showing you the platform that you can use to do that. Of course, you'll want some supplemental narrative here and there, but primarily infographics are a very visual medium. Now, if I have my infographic as I want it, I can go up to File, I'm going to save a copy or save as, and instead of saving this as a PowerPoint presentation, you have various options. You can save this as a JPEG, or as a PNG, or as a TIFF, or even as a PDF. Now I'm going to hop over to another project. This is an example of an infographic that I built out here in PowerPoint. As I zoom out, you can see the infographic in its entirety. I kept this one fairly simple. You can see some of the elements include text boxes. I actually have a transparent box to cover over the icon that I have, the graphic of the house, and that way it gives a little bit of contrast between the house and the text box. Otherwise it bleeds into it, and I don't want the house to be the primary element. But as I click this and tear it apart, you can see the various elements, including a text box, and I have a white box behind the text box, and then I have another box that's outlined to frame the text. And so you can be creative and use the elements built right into PowerPoint to create a pretty sophisticated presentation. And once you have everything how you want it, you can click Save. I'm going to save this.
Something I'm going to emphasize now, and I'm going to emphasize again and again later. Do not have too much text on your slide. Do not make that mistake. I've made that mistake and it ruined the presentation. In fact, I had to present again. It was for my master's course. Please don't make that mistake. It's very tempting to put so much information on the slides. You do not want to do that.
As a PDF. And here you can see my output. If I zoom out a little bit, you can see me scroll through. And again, this can be a PDF, it can also be a PNG, a JPEG. It's something that you can email. You can upload it onto image sharing platforms such as Imager.com, or embed it right into an Outlook or Google Message. Or you can put it on a blog, a website, or an online course. So this is one way that you can create an interesting infographic using PowerPoint.
Okay. Any questions about that? All right. Let's go to what are you going to be doing next week? Next week is your assignment. So let's take a look at what assessments you need to be ready for. Let's take a look. I discussed it last week. So next week, you're going to be working on your Excel assignment. It will be Tuesday and it'll be in the online class. Okay. And it's going to be due. So if I give it to you guys to work on the 16th, you'll need to have it done by the weekend. So it's best to come and work on it in class. Okay. Because I should be able to help you. Now, this is not the assignment that you're going to be getting, but it's something similar. So let's take a look. So what you'll do is you'll have a calculation to go through. So you'll have to create a calculation in Excel, like we discussed, using this information or some similar information. That's number one. Number two, you have to calculate the amount of pollutants that are being loaded through stormwater runoff. Okay, all of the information is given, and you'll have to look up some information as well. And then you'll create a spreadsheet, a budgetary spreadsheet, using the information that's been given here. Okay, all right. And lastly, you'll have to create a line graph using the field soil vapor data that's given here. Okay. And now I do need to have the Excel file submitted because I need to play around with your Excel file and to make sure that whatever you submitted is what we talked about, how the cells should be interconnected. So here is a former student's submission. This was question number 1 that she submitted, where she did some air modeling calculations. So like, for example, if I plug in a difference speed 5, it changes the results. And then I go in and I check to see how the calculations are put together, and then I assign the marks. In this case, the pollutant loading, how she's put together all of the data in a way that's easy to follow. And let's say that I change the concentration. The answer should change as well. Let's say I make this 0.03. There you go. The answer changes. Let's say I change the concentration of zinc to 0.2. The answer changes. Or if I reduce it, 0.0002. Okay. Question number 3, how she's created the budget. You got a rate, got a multiplier. Multiplier meaning, okay, for mobilization, it's once. Health and safety plan, it's once. Well sampling supplies, maybe it's once, or maybe it, depending on how many wells it is, it's more. But that should be outlined for you. And then she's included her references as well. Any questions about the assignment, which you will do next week on Tuesday? I will post it for you by the weekend, so you can start looking at it. Any questions about it now? Worth significant marks, so you want to do a really good job on it. And you want to follow my request. Okay, so the markup is simply, there's a question, what is the markup? If it's a cost that's not a part of your company, you add 10% to whatever their cost is. So in this case, it'll just be the lab. You add 10% or 20%. So whatever it is, you multiply by 1.2. Why? Because you're putting the cost of another company into your budget, but they're going to make that money. So you should make a little bit of money on top of that for handling their cost or handling uh, 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 their aspect or for having them in the project. So all you do is you add you multiply by 1.1 or 1.2, which would be a 10% or 20% markup to that cost. And it's only for something that's a company that's not your company. So it will be a driller, it would be a lab. Okay. Yeah, you just add one column, say markup, and it's only going to be one of the items. By the way, you can ask me these questions again when you're working on your assignment, because we'll log on, you'll work on the assignment, and it'll be an open session like this. In fact, I'm expecting you to come prepared. You should finish your a review of the assignment on the weekend, come prepared to the test, not the test, the assignment, because if you can do the assignment well, you'll do well in the test as well. If we are done, do you want me to introduce the next topic? If you don't have any questions. Okay, so no answer from you guys. Do you want me to end the class or can we start the next session? I'll just give you guys let me give you guys a preamble. So the next part of the course is environmental management systems. So when you think about environmental management systems, it's basically when companies or corporations are trying to minimize their footprint on the environment. It's also they're trying to reduce liability. We looked at the example last week of Freedom Enterprises who basically spilt the chemical into the river, which was the water supply. So that would be an example of a poorly run or a lack of an environmental management system. Now we want to try to cover these three topics here: environmental management, sustainability. What are aspects of the environment that various organizations are looking at? What is an EMS? What are the aspects of an EMS? This is the question we're going to explore in the coming few weeks. What is an environmental management system? What are the different levels of environmental management? But just remember that environmental management could be for anything. When you talk about environmental management, and you say it could be for anything, well, what does that mean? Like, what would environmental management be for a farm? For the college? For a gas station? I guess it makes sense. For a mining operation? Like for a farm, it's the use of OC pesticides. The filling tank, the fuel filling tanks, how to manage those. For the college, remember, it's the hazardous waste from the labs. What else? The HVAC system. The waste management in the hallways. For the gas station, it's the tanks. Spills at the pump islands. For mining, it's the tailing ponds. Again, it's the fuel tanks. Waste. So environmental management is the next main topic of the course that we're going to get into. And one of the things that people do during environmental management, or to make sure that the environmental management system is running, or when they're doing environmental work, is be an environmental data analyst. And that used to be one of my jobs, analyzing environmental data for the government. So let's see what an environmental data analyst does.
What is environmental data analysis? If you're curious about how data helps us understand and protect our environment, you're in the right place. Let's break down what environmental data analysis is all about. Environmental data analysis involves collecting, examining, and interpreting data related to the environment. This includes information about air, water, soil, and even ice. The goal is to use this data to create a clear picture of environmental health and the impact of human activities. Imagine you're a scientist trying to understand why a particular lake is getting polluted. You would collect water samples, measure the levels of various pollutants, and analyze the data to see patterns and trends. This process helps you identify the sources of pollution and how they are affecting the lake's ecosystem. Environmental data analysts play a key role in this process. They gather data from various sources like sensors, satellites, and field observations. This data is then cleaned, transformed, and modeled to extract useful information. For instance, they might use time series analysis to track changes in air quality over time or to predict weather patterns and their impact on the environment. These analysts work in various settings, including government agencies, conservation organizations, and consulting firms. Their work is essential for creating
data analysis and consulting firms, they usually work on the micro level or in smaller projects, whereas data analysts in the government or in the public sector usually work on larger or macro scale, on a macro scale.
Reports that help policymakers and the public understand environmental issues. For example, an environmental data analyst might present findings on climate change to governments, highlighting trends and suggesting actions to mitigate its effects. The tools they use are quite advanced. Software like Consuv's cloud platform allows for real-time data collection and visualization from wireless sensors. This helps in monitoring temperature, humidity, and light levels, and even provides alerts if these parameters go beyond set thresholds. In practice, environmental data analysis involves several key steps. First, data is collected from various sources. Then, it is inspected for errors and cleaned up. Next, the data is transformed into a format that can be analyzed. And finally, it is modeled to identify trends and patterns.
What we've been talking about so far is using the data to be put in a format that can be read or presented or understood is what we've been talking about today, using infographics.
This process helps researchers and policymakers make informed decisions about environmental policies and sustainability initiatives. For instance, in the context of air pollution, analysts use historical and real-time data to track pollution levels, anticipate future trends, and develop strategies to reduce pollution. This is particularly important in regions like China, which has been actively working to improve air quality through data-driven approaches.
The last thing
In summary,
for today is what is environmental data or what are environmental management systems? That is our next main topic. Environmental management systems.
Hi guys, it's Luke here from NH Consulting, back with another video. Today I want to answer one simple question, and that is, what is ISO 14001:2015? Okay, so I wanted to kind of touch upon ISO 14001:2015 because just how as we have done or are doing at the moment with 9001, I want to actually do the same with 14001. So I want to break it down clause by clause, take you through and explain what it is. So that is work for the future. But I just wanted to give you a simple video now in order to explain what it actually is. So ISO 14001:2015 is a standard which will show you how to implement a best practice environmental management system into your business. It is structured in a similar manner to the ISO 9001-2015 standard, as it's structured the same as the new ISO 45001, so the quality and the health and safety. They're all brought together now with the environmental under what's called Annex SL, which kind of brings the structures all together. So if you want to do some more research on that, if you have any more questions on that, do get in touch. But it's all structured around the same thing. So there's 10 clauses. Within them clauses, the different things. So in the environmental standard, we talk about from the start is the context of organisation in terms of its environmental, the planning, the resources, so the environmental training you would require to operate an environmental management system, depending on the risks, the type of organisation you're in. We'd have to do some environmental audits, so we'd have to look at legal compliance, we'd have to identify our legislation that's applicable to our business, how we then go about complying with that legislation, and then finally how we prove we comply with that legislation. And then obviously a management review which considers environmental issues and setting targets and objectives relevant to the environmental management system. So it's very much the same sort of structure as 9001, that Plan, Do, Check, Act.
Okay, all right. So that is the next area we're going to work on. And that ends today's class.